So we're ready to go. This is a talk I actually put together about 5 or 6 years ago for the Arizona Centennial. And it's mostly a history talk and a few minerals. I tried to get mineral specimens from back in the territorial times, and it's hard to find verified specimens from that point in time. I want to have to acknowledge John Callahan for doing the base map. My friends at the Yale Peabody Museum for loaning me some specimens from this era, and Evan Jones for a photo that he has, which you'll see later with credits. Okay, there's been mining in the southwestern United States as long as there's been human beings here. The Native Americans is dated as early as 200 BC. The Native Americans were using picked up specimens for their decorative and tools. All over in northeast Albuquerque, New Mexico, there's a turquoise working that goes back to the prehistoric times, with steps actually carved into the side of the little trench. Obsidian and chert were used for tools, and all kinds of oxide minerals were used for pigments and dyes. The Spanish colonial period started. The first Spanish into this area found turquoise at Turquoise Mountain, Cochise County, which is the same as the Defiance District, and the Surbat Mountains, which is up by Kingman. They've been using salt from the Camp Verde, Yavapai County locality on the near Jerome, and coal from the Navajo mine in the plateau, on the Colorado Plateau. During the Spanish, the remains of the Cabeza de Vaca party crossed into New Mexico and Arizona from their adventure in Florida. And that's where the tale of the cities of gold came from. And in 1538, the Viceroy of New Spain sent a second party out, guided by Estebancito, which is the little Esteban. And they found Pueblo Indian mesa houses, and they thought these were the cities of gold. In 1540, Coronado came in and basically wiped out a whole bunch of the Native American tribes. And he explored as far north as the Zunis, which are up by the Grand Canyon. Jerome was found early on by the Spanish and actually tried to put into production, but it's in the middle of nowhere if you're having to go by horse and mule. The workings of Jerome were 16 to 17 feet deep, and it started they say a land rush, but the land rush was maybe 100 people. The first land patent granted in the Arizona Territory was to Juan de Onate from Zacatecas. And it resulted in some properties in the central Arizona. We think one of them was Ray, And then Padre Kino entered southern Arizona along the Santa Cruz and set up missions as far north as Tucson. Kino actually was the first to actually recognize the mineral wealth in Arizona. He is quoted, "These new nations and new lands, there are good veins of mineral lands bearing gold and silver in the neighborhood and even on the site of the missions. Some new mining camps and very rich silver." That was a reference to the Henselman deposit down by the Mexico border. And there's an aside to that, one of the chemo missions is right near the San Francisco line in Sonora, the Wolfenite Memetite locality. And a few years later, Juan Bautista de Anza reported the discovery of silver in Arizona. This is the Plantas de Plata, which is near Nogales. And there were balls of chunks of silver containing up to 2,500 pounds. This was chlorargyrite. Most of this was chlorargyrite and native silver. Sorry about that. A boom town called Real de Arizona is believed to be which is near Real de Plantas de Plata. The silver, since it was in as chlorargyrite native silver, didn't require mercury to amalgamate it. So they got away with silver without paying their quinto real, the royal fifth, the 20% tax that went to the King of Spain. And the district went into litigation and was finally closed by the New Spain government for failure to pay taxes. But that was part of that was the reason was the way they collected the taxes. And they collected the taxes on the amount of mercury that you bought. So these guys really were still obeying the law because they weren't buying mercury. Following the closing of the mines in Real de Arizona, prospectors continued to explore all around southern Arizona. And there was a couple of mercury deposits up by Phoenix that were found. And these got them again away from, they didn't have to buy mercury. They could use the native mercury that they found. I don't know whether they had found Terlingua by this point or not. I don't think so. The part of the problem in prospecting in Arizona, this territory at this time, was protection from the Apaches and the other Native Americans. The Yaquis in northern Sonora were as bad or worse than the Apaches. And this next slide shows a map of New Spain. And as you can see, there's a number of settlements along the coast and down Baja and in Sonora and Sinaloa in Mexico. Oops, what did I do? But when you get up into the territory of Nuevo Mexico, which is what was all of the Southwest California, southern tip of Nevada, Arizona, and New Mexico. Most of the cities or the developments are along the Rio Grande in New Mexico and just eating into southern Arizona, south of the Gila River. because of the Indian problems and Spanish problems, ranches in Arizona, ranchitos and ranches, were abandoned in 1820. In 1821, the Mexican War of Independence in Pancho Villa was from Sonora or Chihuahua. And he plundered into all of northern Mexico and shut down mines and appropriated mines and properties. So the Mexican government set up presidios, or little forts, along the trade routes to protect people. But that didn't do them any good between stage stops or fort stops. The Mexican War ended in 1848 with the Treaty of Guadalupe de Algaldo. And the US paid $5 million for California, Nevada, Utah, New Mexico, and portions of Colorado, Wyoming, and Arizona. The reason I say part of Arizona is that below the Gila River was not considered part of the sale at that time. At that time, Texas had already won its independence. And so that was a different deal altogether. So on the left, we see 1847 map of Mexico, and it shows blue, the Baja California in blue, and then the Sonora, Arizona, New Mexico area here in pinkish and green and unknown. And so the way it was divided up was California most of Arizona was in California. Nuevo Mexico was a small strip, and the rest of the east was Tejas, Texas. And the nation of Mexico was down to the south. In 1854, because of the railway routes, Gadsden set up a treaty with Mexico whereby he purchased the part of Arizona that's south of the Gila River to the current border for $10 million. And Santa Anna signed that. That was Santa Anna that got defeated by the Texans in San Jacinto, Texas, just outside of Houston. And he was then dictator of Mexico and was thrown out 2 years after signing the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. Another interesting fact is that, unknown to both governments, 9 days before the treaties of Guadalupe Hidalgo was signed, they had discovered gold in Sutter's Mill in California, but because of communication, neither one of the governments knew about this. And in the first year after this treaty was signed, they extracted $45 million from California gold fields. So I don't, if Sutter's Mill had happened 6 months earlier, California would not be part of the US, I suspect. So if we look at where mining was taking place at this time in Arizona, we see it was Jerome that I talked about a minute ago, Ajo. There was a surveyor on a US Geological Survey surveyor who had found the Ajo mine. Cerro Colorado, which was the Henselman project, silver mine, and Arizonac, which was the other name for Ponchos de Plata. So now Arizona has become a U.S. territory. And it prospecting flourished under U.S. law, but there really was no law. This was territorial law, and I looked up at this early point in time. There was 2 sheriffs for the New Mexico territory, which Arizona was a county of to start with. Arizona developed from the west to the east because of the returning miners from the California gold rush who became disenchanted with the fact that they didn't make any money or didn't find any gold, or half the family got killed. So these areas established what they were called early mining districts along the Colorado River and in Cerro, Colorado, which is down by Nogales. These mining districts, here's a map of, in 1851, we think, of the New Mexico territory, showing in red Arizona as a county. So this is after the Gadsden Purchase. And here it is again. This is the big Utah territory, included all of Nevada and Utah. And New Mexico territory included part of Nevada, or all of Arizona and New Mexico. During the 17 years that Arizona was a part of New Mexico, mining prospectors crossed all over this area, and they found the Moss Mine, which is a gold mine up near Kingman, the Planet, the La Paz district, which is the Silver district, which is where the Red Cloud is, the Gila district, which is east of Yuma. That's where the Puzzler, the Hull mine are. Then central Arizona, Iron King, Rich Hill, Lynx and Groom Creek. Part of those, most of those were gold prospects. Sonora, which is the town of Sonora, is now incorporated in the Ray Pit. Silver Bell, and then Henselman, Maori district, and the Bronco. So if we look at what happens in the mine, once these areas were prospected heavily, then they become established mining districts. And the mining districts were the first real law in this part of the world. You had the steps you had to go to establish a mining district, or public notice of miners, and a proposal for the formation of the district and setting up a meeting to solve the rest of the questions. They had to determine a name of the district, how big the district was going to be, elect a president and a recorder, establish the size of claims in the district, establish the number of claims that could be owned by a person, establish who could own claims, establish work requirements for the claim. In other words, you couldn't just have a claim on the ground and do nothing with it. Establish a means of adjusting disputes, which normally meant a trial, which was presided over by the president as the judge, and the 2 parties with an issue. Each district had different rules, and this generally caused confusion, because if you were a miner and you were staking claims in one district and it was one size, and you went to another district and you tried to stake that same size claim, and their claims were smaller, you had a problem. And what we call they dealt with extralateral rights, which are dips and spurs in the vein that occur below the ground and are not seen on the ground, and who owns them and how they follow. So I got a couple of pictures here of this is a gold from the Moss mine. This is from the Yale collection in the 1800s of fluorite from the Oatman district, 1865. Benjamin Silliman was the one that collected a lot of this material, and he was a professor of geology at Yale. Ajo. Peter Bradley, working for the Texas Western Railroad Survey, when he met a Sioux Indian who showed him the green outcroppings at Ajo, which was the start of the copper at Ajo. Brady then established the Arizona Mining and Trading Company and staked claims in Ajo as their principal asset. Remember now, all of this was done on horse and mule and maybe a freight wagon. And the closest real transportation hub was Tucson. This was the first organized mining company to operate in Arizona. Ore was actually shipped to San Diego and then to England, United Kingdom, to Wales for processing. And they didn't make any money with the first ones because the grade was not high enough to pay for the shipping and the processing. So that's Ajo. And so the shipping would have gone to Yuma, and then it had to go across the Mojave Desert to San Diego. The Henselman project, or Cerro Colorado. Nogales is right here where the creek, San Pedro, crosses the border. So this is just north and west of Nogales. It was discovered in 1854 by Charles Poston and Herman Ehrenberg. They were looking for planchas de plata, but they found high-grade silver veins near Aravaca. They located claims, established the Sonora Exploring and Mining Company with offices in Tubac. Tubac is now a little place down on the freeway to Nogales where artisan shops are. The Sonora Exploring and Mining Company spun off the Santa Rita Company. And in 1859, Samuel Colt replaced Henselman as the president of the Sonora Exploring and Mining Company. And the first weekly newspaper published in Arizona was in Tubac. San Pedro is the San Pedro silver mine is over by Tombstone and has a very interesting history. Fred Brunkow in 1857 was working for the Sonora Exploring and Mining Company as a mining engineer. And this is the same company that Green took over later on and used to explore Cananea and some of the big mines in northern Sonora and Chihuahua, Mexico. Broncow located the silver mines southwest of, or is almost due west of Tombstone, down on the San Pedro River. It's mostly vanadinite is the specimens that came from there. Broncow had been operating his little mine, and again, it was on native silver and chlorargyrite for several years when Ed Shefflin stopped by on his way to Tombstone. And it was Shefflin that it was Broncow that told Shefflin that all he was going to find on that hill was Indians and his tombstone. So that's how Tombstone actually got it. The first claim that Shefflin staked was called the Tombstone. There's a whole story about the Broncow, but that's a different talk. So by 1859, this is a Rand McNally map of the Western United States. Now we have an Arizona territory, a New Mexico territory, a Utah territory, and an Oregon territory, and a Washington. So that the Louisiana Purchase, which was the Oregon, Washington, Idaho, Missouri, North, South Dakota area, was starting to get incorporated into the states. The 1860 census, the population of New Mexico Territory, County of Arizona, was 1,541. Tucson had the largest population at 643. Gila City, which was up around Ray, had 58. Arivaca, which was Henselman, had 27. And Ajo had 18 people. So we're coming up to the United States Civil War. It began in 1861. All of the military that had been in the territory to guard the people were pulled out, and the railroad surveys and whatever were pulled out. And so the Native Americans and the Mexicans both believed that they'd pushed the Americans out of Arizona, and they pretty much took over. The stage line was discontinued because of safety issues. Only a few mining camps operated. The Maori mine, which was near Patagonia, produced lead and silver until they arrested Maori and threw him in jail in Yuma for 6 months for operating a mine without some kind of a permit. Central Arizona and Western Arizona continued prospecting and mining along the Colorado River with the protection of Fort Yuma. Fort Yuma was one of the few forts that did not get completely abandoned. The results were the founding of La Paz City and the mining in the Dome Rock, Bradshaw, and Bradshaw Mountains. These were all gold properties. The Planet was a copper property about between Kingman and Yuma. And the Oatman District was another gold prospect. Arizona declared its independence from New Mexico Arizona was declared independent territory from New Mexico in 1863. And the first territorial government was Goodwin, and he established the capital in Prescott. A new census was ordered in for the new territory. And at this point, there were 4,573 people in the Arizona territory. 2,400 were working males, and half of those listed their occupation as minor. 1 in 4 people was a miner or a prospector. By the end of 1864, there were 25 established mining districts in the territory. And remember, this is different law in different mining districts. We haven't gotten territorial law yet. And Tucson actually remained the center of the mining booms in Arizona. As in the next 15 years, there was a lot more districts described. And I'll go through some of this and some of the law. This is a piece of chrysocolla from the Planet Mine, 1866. The new ones that have just come out are nice little beautiful chrysocolla balls on dark goethite. They look very nice. Look like little tiny fur balls on brown to blackish goethite. This is a stromayerite from the Silver King mine. All these mid-1800s samples, all from Yale. Anglesite from Castle Dome, 1872. And a beautiful silver from the Stonewall Jackson up by Phoenix. This is 7.5 centimeters wide. It's Evan Jones's special specimen. Okay, so mining law. November 3rd, 1864. The 1864, they established the Uniform Mining Code for the territory. Claim size was 200 yards square, including the vein. The claims had to be perfected by a shaft 30 feet deep or an adit tunnel 50 feet long. You had to have 2 years to get machinery for production and in production. That was a fairly short period of time when you figure that it would probably take several months for machinery to get from St. Louis to this area by wagon. So here's what a map of what the Arizona Territory looked like in 1865. As you can see, it included north of the Colorado River into what is now Nevada. The north and east lines are the same as they were. And the west line was the Colorado River up to the point of going into Nevada. But you also can see that there were a few trails and regularly traveled routes, but cities were far and few between. It was only 4,000 people. That would be a reasonable assumption. In November 5th, 1866, the Bureau of Mines was established and claim size was allowed to be authorized in each district. No claim could be located until a valuable target. They had to have discovery first before you located a claim. The holder of the certificate of location must be a citizen of the United States, including the territories. holding unpatented claim required $100 per year as proof of labor to continue the validity of the claim. In other words, you couldn't do nothing with the claim. You had to work, put at least $100 worth of work into the claim to continue your ownership. Coal, oil, gas, asphaltic materials, sodium, sulfur, and building stone were not locatable. They had to be leased from the US government. And the rules for patenting the claim were called the prudent man rule. Would a prudent man invest money to develop this property? And that's a very subjective thing, because if you were in the middle of nowhere and had no infrastructure, but you had a high-grade vein, the question is it economic? Well, it would be for a guy by himself on a mule, but would it be for a company? It's all about economics. So in 1867, we had sorted out the shapes of both New Mexico and Arizona to their final, what they are today. So I went back and looked up some wages and prices in 1870s and I couldn't find Arizona, but I got Colorado, which all the West was going to be about the same. Carpenters made $2 to $2.50 to $5 a day. Masons and bricklayers were the highest paid, $4 to $6 a day. Common laborers, $2.50. Railroad laborers, $2, unless they were Chinese. Miners, $3 to $4. Bookkeepers, $2.50 to $4.25, etc. A house rented for $15 to $30 a month. Hotels were $2 to $4 a day, and rail and stage fare was 10 cents a mile. Meals were 75 cents to $1. Family income with 2 boys and a father working, or about $1,000 and $1,100 a year. So then in 1872, the Mining Act was approved, May 10th, and this made federal mining law for all of the United States. It gave the right of any citizen or corporation, US citizen or corporation, the right to stake a mining claim on public land. A valid claim must have discovery before staking. A hard rock claim was set to be no larger than 1,500 feet along the vein and 300 feet on either side of the vein. Placer claims were different. Required yearly assessment work with documentation. No claims for the products we talked about earlier. They kept that long. Extralateral rights were included, it's also called the law of apex. Patenting still required the prudent man rule. And briefly, the extralateral rights are the end lines of the claim, the ones that cross the vein, must be parallel. And those go to infinity towards the center of the earth. The sidelines of the claim, which are parallel to the vein. And if the vein dips at 100 feet, it moves over enough that it's off of the sidelines, you are still allowed to mine it because it's a continuous same vein, even though you may be on somebody else's claim. So this caused all kinds of problems and still does. But that's just the way the law is. In 1880, the census, 21% of the working males were employed as miners. There were 7 copper mines, 232 precious metal lode mines, 2 placer mines, 2 amalgamation mills, that's with mercury for gold, 5 arrastras, that's a crushing plant, and 1 smelter. There was the first stock exchange was set up as the American and Mexican Mining Exchange, established in Tucson to promote mining and collect pertinent information for engineers and investors. This is a picture of an arrastra. Oh, this is a picture of a prospector. Oh, I was going to show you an arrastra. My question is, does anybody have an idea of why you go anywhere you go in the Western US, you find all these little prospects that have a little bit of showing of azurite and malachite or oxidized sulfides or some kind of indication of alteration for mineralization. Anybody got any ideas of why this is and why these people spent the amount of time they did trying to find this mineralization? I'll tell you what my opinion. My opinion is that this is because the value of time was 0, or essentially 0. And if you were a prospector and you didn't have anything but your rifle and a couple of mules and some supplies, it didn't matter whether it took you a day or 5 days to get from Tucson to Marana, or from Tombstone to Bisbee. And so the only way these guys had the guy that had nothing, had any hope of getting something and moving up in the world, making something big of himself, was to find a mine. And that's what the mining law was all about at that time. So everybody wandered around everywhere. Some of the most inhospitable places you can think of, vertical cliffs and middle of the desert, little outcrops here and there. And they dug on them and hoping they could find a quote discovery so they could have a claim. And we see the results of that today. Okay, 1877, the Pacific Railroad entered Arizona on the 30th of September and crossed into New Mexico 3 years later. So it took them 3 years to build the railroad across southern Arizona. But this changed the West. This was the real first major change to the living conditions in the West since steamships took people to California. It allowed process to be shipped to the centers of commerce on the East Coast. By 1890, another 10 years, the transcontinental crossed Arizona twice, once in the south and once up by Flagstaff to Kingman in the north. This shows the route of the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railroad in red. It actually went all the way down through Mexico to the port of Topolobampo. And then there were spur lines that went out, the black line to the spur lines for the Western US. This is a county map of Arizona, 1887. And it shows the railroads. This is the major north-south railroad, north. This is the major southern road. And the railroads didn't do this all on their good graces and dollars of the American public. they were given huge amounts of land. Under the Railways Act, 200 million acres were granted to the railroads of public land. It was actually then reduced later to 131 million, but that's 80% of the size of Texas. The land grants range from 6 to 40 miles on both sides of the tracks. Therefore, each mile of rail track, the railroad received an equal number of square miles of land as the grant was wide. So if the grant was 20 miles wide in this particular area, the they put in 1 mile of railroad and they received 20 square miles of land at the same time. This is also at the time when homestead entries were being made, which was the Homestead Act, where people could stake claims and develop property to own for small amounts of money. This is a picture of the
we seem to have lost the transmission a bit there. Let's give Jim another few seconds.
Yeah, Steve, you want to ping him on Messenger, see if that helps?
Yeah. Oh no, we've lost him completely now. That's a bit of a shame. Yeah, so try and get him.
I was just waiting for him to get to Bisbee.
One of the YouTube channels I've been following is on the Cerro Gordo mine, near Death Valley. It's been quite fascinating. Silver mine in California, about that era.
How do you spell that? Cerro Gordo?
It's CERRO GORDO.
Oh, yeah, got it.
Yeah. It's called, the channel's called Ghost Town Living.
Yeah.
It's quite an endearing little channel, actually. I don't think he's much of a geologist, though.
Right.
We've definitely lost him, and I've pinged him, but I haven't got a response. So we might have to maybe get him to revisit the last part of his presentation next time round.
Yeah. What state's he in?
Arizona.
Oh, right.
Yes, it's a pity. That was really interesting talk as well.
Yeah, it was good.
I like the history about the old stuff. It's good.
It's just a bit unfortunate. Go on, never mind. Jim did tell me before we started that we've got the possibility of maybe Peter McGaw giving this talk on Santa Eulalia. Not sure how you pronounce it, but it's close enough. Doug, definite thumbs up from you.
That would be nice.
Yep, I'll have a chat to Peter and see if
Plenty of rocks from there. he knows what he's talking about.
And the other thing that we can add to the list is I've got past the letter C now in the Minerals of Australia, so we can do the C list. And then we'll see how we go from that. All right. It doesn't look like Jim's going to get back to us anyway, so just check there. No. So we might finish up for today. I won't ask if anybody's got any questions because we haven't got anybody to respond to them.
I can ask questions all
Well,
day.
yeah, you can. But you'd have to- you'll have
I
to
have a
ex-
question. Hey, Paul, how's your health?
Yeah, it's not too bad. Slowly, surely, still on crutches, but hobbling around without them occasionally. Still waiting to hear from the surgeon when I go back in, though. So it's not over yet.
But they beat that little.
Yeah.
infection?
As far as I'm aware, it's gone. I'm assuming I was told by the infectious diseases surgeon that if I didn't hear from him, everything was just fine. So no news is good news at this point.
Good.
So I'm anticipating that next month I will be out of action, and then I'll spend December recovering, and then sometime in January I will throw the crutches away in dramatic fashion and start hobbling around like an old person.
Like a normal old person.
Like a normal old person, yeah.
Paul will never be normal.
That'd be boring. No,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm missing out on shows, and I'm missing out on prospecting trips, and it's really killing me. It's really sad. So I've had to buy rocks instead. It's terrible. And despite the fact that I'm incapacitated, I'm still collecting specimens at a faster rate than I can catalogue them.
Very good.
I'm just going to have to live forever so that I can get it all done.
Yeah.
I know that problem.
Mhm.
And just as an aside, it looks like Jacques has missed out on because of daylight saving changes.
Yeah, sure, of course. He doesn't read, he never reads his
Oh.
emails.
No.
It's
So
that
just-
time of
just
year
joined.
again.
Jacques, you're an hour late. All right. Till next month then, and I'll work
Yeah.
out what we're going to do, and I'll talk to Peter and see if he's
Awesome.
available, and
See you.
advertise it in the normal way, and see you all then.
Yeah, definitely want to get.
See you all in January, because
Oh.
in December I'm not here.
I'll see you before then, though, Hank. So
Yeah, that's right.
okay.
Okay.
Sorry, Paul?
See you there, huh?
yeah, absolutely.
Thanks,
Paul,
Steve.
Did you?
Thank you. Take care.
No, we're good.
Oh,
Thank you,
okay.
Steve.
All right.
Thanks, Steve. Bye-bye.
See you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye all.